There's a moment, sharp as a blade and soft as breath, when someone expects you to break. They watch, they wait, they push, hoping to see your reaction. You don't start flinch. You don't start fight. You look at them not with anger, not with fear, just with a presence so still, it unsettles their entire performance. You didn't start clap back. You didn't start defend yourself. You simply existed in your truth. And in that silence, they folded. When people talk about relationships with a significant age gap, the conversation often gets reduced to numbers. She's 20, he's 40. And that's where it stops. But numbers alone don't tell the story. What we're really talking about is not age, it's power. Emotional power. Psychological authority. Experience as leverage. And often one person knows exactly what they're doing while the other is still discovering who they are. A young woman is not just younger in years, she is often earlier in her relationship to herself. She is still forming boundaries, still discovering what no sounds like in her own voice, still learning the consequences of silence, of people-pleasing, of being liked rather than being respected. And when you step into that dynamic with the maturity of years behind you, the question isn't just, can you, but why would you? There's a temptation to believe the interaction is mutual, that it's two consenting adults, and thus nothing more should be said. But consent without context is a dangerous game. Because the power imbalance doesn't announce itself with a warning sign. It shows up in the subtle ways one person shapes the narrative while the other tries to keep up. One is fluent in manipulation, the other is fluent in hope. One interprets silence as agreement. The other experiences confusion as compliance. Often the older partner believes they are being desired. But what's really happening is projection, being seen through the wide eyes of someone still trying to understand the world. It's not love. It's admiration laced with insecurity. And that admiration is seductive. It can feel affirming, even addictive. But underneath, there's a quiet transaction happening. You offer her attention, she offers you reverence. You offer access, she gives you self-doubt in return. It's not even, it's never been even. When you engage with someone significantly younger, especially when emotional maturity isn't fully formed, you're not just participating in romance, you're shaping their definition of it. That kind of power leaves a mark. For many young women, the first relationships they have with older partners don't age well in memory. What once felt special slowly reveals itself as manipulation draped in charm. What felt like a fair exchange starts to look like something she didn't have the language to question at the time. This is why it's not about age. It's about what you're doing with your knowledge, your emotional fluency, your seasoned instincts. Are you using them to guide or to dominate, to awaken or to blur? Because the line between mentorship and manipulation is not always clear to the one just starting out, but it's always clear to the one who's already been there. When a young woman steps into a dynamic where she holds less power, less emotional sovereignty, the responsibility to protect, not exploit, that imbalance rests on the one who knows better. The one who's been through heartbreaks and reinventions, who has the vocabulary for trauma and knows what silence can mean. There's a difference between wanting someone and wanting to be wanted. One arises from connection, the other from deficiency. Many confuse desire with attraction. But what they're really feeding is their ego. Not the hunger of the body, but the ache of the self. And nowhere does this confusion show up more starkly than in the allure of the young. When a man is drawn to a young woman, it's tempting to frame it as pure chemistry, as something visceral, as though nature herself ordained it. But often, if we peel back the layers, what we find underneath is not lust, but longing. A longing to feel relevant, to be seen, to be admired again in a way the world no longer offers. Her eyes don't just reflect interest, they reflect vitality, a version of you that feels alive again. But is that really desire? Or is it the echo of a self you miss? The ego is clever. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you that you deserve this, that this connection is real, that you're finally being appreciated. But it never tells you why you need to be seen this way in the first place. It doesn't ask what feels lost within you. It just seeks a mirror that flatters, not reflects, and young women, with their openness, curiosity, and emotional availability, become perfect mirrors until they stop. When ego leads, intimacy becomes performance. You start curating yourself, managing her perception of you. You show her the best version, accomplished, composed, impressive. Not because you want her to know you, but because you want her to believe in you. And she does. Until she starts asking questions you don't want to answer. Until she begins to see cracks in the projection. That's when desire fades. Because it was never about her, it was about how she made you feel about you. Real desire sees the other. It listens. It honors the fullness of another person's complexity. But when ego is in charge, the other person disappears. They become a means to an end. A dopamine hit, a validation tool. Someone to admire you, not someone to grow with you. And when their admiration fades, because it will, you're left not with intimacy, but with withdrawal, like a high that doesn't last. And the emptiness returns. The tragedy here isn't the age gap. It's the emotional one. When someone chases youth, they're often trying to fill a space inside them that has nothing to do with the person in front of them. That space isn't erotic. It's existential. And using someone's curiosity to escape your own emptiness doesn't heal you. It just delays the reckoning. Because the truth always comes. You weren't looking for her, you were looking for a reflection of who you used to be, or who you wish you were. And she unknowingly was cast in a play that wasn't hers. There's something undeniably magnetic about someone in the process of becoming. A young woman is not fixed. She's fluid. Her identity is still unfolding, her desires still evolving, her understanding of herself still tender. That fluidity can feel intoxicating to someone whose own sense of self has long solidified or worse, grown stagnant. She is in motion. And you, whether you admit it or not, are looking for an exit, not from her but from yourself. She is stepping into life with her hands open. She is still collecting experiences, trying on different versions of herself to see which one fits. Her innocence isn't about naivety. It's about potential. She is learning the cost of giving too much, the strength it takes to say no, the heartbreak that teaches her to ask better questions. And in this sacred becoming, there is something vulnerable and raw, something that calls out not just to your desire, but to the part of you that has stopped evolving. You're not entering her life to walk alongside her. You're using her momentum to distract yourself from your own stillness. You're not building something together, you're leaning on her curiosity to avoid the heaviness of your own disillusionment. She is exploring the world for the first time. You perhaps are retreating from it. What you call attraction may actually be envy, the longing to feel wonder again, to see yourself through fresh eyes. Not hers, but yours. But here's the cost. While she's moving forward, you're trying to go backward. She is growing into her body, her voice, her presence, and you are clinging to the parts of yourself you feel slipping away. You are not meeting in the middle. You are borrowing her aliveness because you're afraid to create your own. And when you do that, you interrupt her path. Not with violence, but with influence. Not with intention, but with presence. Your years give you an edge. Not just in knowledge, but in persuasion. She might admire you, look to you for guidance, even feel seen by you in ways her peers cannot provide. But admiration is not equality. Her fascination is not informed consent, it's part of her learning process. And if you place yourself inside that process, without being conscious of your role, you're not connecting, you're colonizing. Her experience becomes about you, her choices shaped by your reactions, her silence tailored to your comfort. What feels like romance can, over time, reveal itself as interruption. Her becoming gets molded to fit your escape plan. And that shaping leaves marks not always visible but deeply felt. Because while you're escaping your discontent, She's absorbing a version of intimacy that teaches her to make herself smaller, softer, more palatable. Not because she wants to, but because your presence makes it feel necessary. She's not your redemption. She's not your second chance. She's not here to save you from your own emotional atrophy. And if you engage with her without realizing that, you won't just delay your own growth, you might damage hers. Seduction is an art. It plays with mystery, language, presence. It thrives in tension and anticipation, in the knowing glances and the unsaid truths. But seduction is not innocent, it's powerful. It holds the ability to open someone, to awaken parts of them they've never explored before. And with that power comes responsibility. Because once you invite someone into a space of vulnerability, you don't get to walk away untouched by what happens next. To seduce without responsibility is to turn a human being into an experiment. You provoke feeling, ignite longing, stir confusion, and then leave them to sort through the emotional wreckage alone. You were the one who knew better. You knew how your words would land. You understood the dynamic. You recognized the signs of dependency forming. But instead of pulling back with care, you leaned in with curiosity. You made yourself the answer to questions she hadn't even learned to ask yet. A young woman, especially one still coming into her emotional autonomy, often enters seduction with an open heart but an inexperienced mind. She wants to feel wanted. She wants to be seen. She is exploring her desirability, testing the edges of her own voice. When you step into that moment with your maturity, your confidence, your experience, you have a choice. You can honor her exploration, or you can exploit it. When you use your charm to guide her deeper into desire, while keeping your own emotional distance, that is not connection, it's control. You curate her experience so that it serves your need, not hers. You lead her with compliments, then withdraw when she needs clarity. You initiate intimacy, but reject responsibility for the emotions that follow. And when she asks for more presence, more honesty, more anchoring, you tell yourself she's too much. But she's not too much. She's responding to a door you opened. The most dangerous kind of seduction isn't overt, it's subtle. It pretends to care while remaining non-committal. It offers affection but withholds accountability. It plays on the hunger for intimacy while never offering nourishment. And when the other person finally breaks, when the tension turns to tears, or silence, or self-blame, you tell yourself they knew what they were getting into. But did they? Or did they only know what you let them believe? Responsibility means being aware of what your presence does to someone. It means recognizing the emotional impact of your actions, not just in the moment but in the aftermath. It means understanding that you are not just playing with desire, you're shaping someone's internal narrative about worth, trust, and love. You can't awaken something in another person and then deny the effect. If you were intentional enough to spark longing, you must be mature enough to hold space for what it brings up. Otherwise, it isn't seduction, it's emotional abandonment. And it leaves behind a confusion that looks like heartbreak but feels like betrayal. There's a reason some are drawn to youth, not because of the person in front of them, but because of what youth represents. It reflects energy, curiosity, admiration. It doesn't challenge, it marvels. And for someone struggling with internal doubts, that reflection can feel like a remedy. But the truth is, when validation is sourced from youth, it's rarely about love. It's about escape, about repairing a fragile sense of self by being near someone too inexperienced to see the cracks. Emotional immaturity doesn't always look like impulsive behavior or overt selfishness. Sometimes it disguises itself in sophistication, in the ability to charm, seduce, and connect. But maturity is not about how well you perform intimacy. It's about how deeply you understand its consequences. And one of the clearest signs of emotional immaturity is needing someone who knows less than you to make you feel more than you are. When an older person seeks validation through the attention of a much younger woman, it often reveals a discomfort with emotional equals, with someone who sees them clearly. who can recognize the patterns, name the inconsistencies, and mirror back not just admiration but accountability. That kind of reflection requires depth to hold. But youth offers a softer lens, one that flatters more than it exposes, one that doesn't yet have the emotional vocabulary to ask the hard questions. You're not validated by her youth, you're protected by her inexperience. She doesn't yet see through the performance. She hasn't yet learned to differentiate between affection and manipulation, between presence and performance, and in her eyes, you are still impressive, still centered, still strong. That illusion becomes a drug, one that cushions the sting of your own internal doubts. But it's temporary, because no matter how much someone younger admires you, they cannot save you from what you refuse to face within. The validation you seek is not wrong. It's human. We all want to be seen, desired, valued. But when that need becomes compulsive, when it drives you toward people who lack the life experience to protect themselves from your projections, it becomes damaging. Not just to them, but to you. You begin to outsource your self-worth, to build your confidence on unstable ground. And eventually that ground gives way. Not because of her, but because it was never real to begin with. True emotional maturity isn't about being adored, it's about being understood. And that kind of understanding requires presence, self-awareness, and the willingness to be seen in your fullness, not just your performance. It's easy to impress someone who hasn't yet discovered their own value. It's much harder and more transformative to be with someone who sees you clearly and stays. Not because they're mesmerized, but because they respect the depth you've earned. If you keep reaching for youth to feel alive, it's not her you're missing, it's your own growth. The part of you that stopped developing the moment you decided admiration was safer than authenticity. Power seduces quietly. It flatters the ego, reinforces control, and gives the illusion of invulnerability. In the moment it feels clean, like clarity, like confidence. When you are the one with more experience, more language, more emotional leverage, you can guide the story, shape the interaction, even decide when and how it ends. And when the person across from you is young, still learning the terrain of their own identity, the imbalance works in your favor, until it doesn't. Because power always leaves an aftertaste, and more often than not that taste is shame. Shame doesn't always arrive immediately. It waits, it lingers in the quiet moments after. In the mornings when her laughter no longer feels flattering but dissonant. When her texts feel heavier than they should. When her admiration starts to look more like dependence. At first, it was intoxicating. Being seen through such soft eyes, being needed, admired, chosen. But what once felt affirming begins to feel unearned. The part of you that celebrated being on a pedestal begins to feel the weight of standing on one. The shame doesn't come from her, it comes from the knowledge that she gave more than you asked for, and you took more than you were willing to hold. It comes from recognizing that you shaped her emotional reality without the courage to stay in it. That you let her believe it meant more than it did. That her honesty met your ambiguity, and her vulnerability met your convenience. Power is not wrong, it's inevitable in human dynamics. But what you do with it defines your character. When you use it to seduce without regard for what follows, the shame grows in the silence you leave behind, the words you didn't say, the feelings you didn't validate, the confusion you didn't help clarify. And that silence, it echoes. Because deep down you knew when she hesitated, you knew when she asked for more clarity. You knew she didn't have the tools to navigate the complexity you introduced into her world. The moment may have felt like mutual desire, but time has a way of revealing the full picture. And when the distance sets in, when she begins to unravel what happened and you begin to review your role, it becomes hard to avoid the truth. You weren't brave, you were just in control. And control without care, without accountability is never clean. It's manipulative, even when it's quiet, even when it's dressed as affection. You may try to rationalize it. Tell yourself she was an adult, that she wanted it, that she chose it. And maybe all those things are true, but shame doesn't arrive to argue facts. It arrives when your integrity knows the difference between what you could do and what you should have done. It's not about legality. It's about morality. Not about action but intention. And what began as a power trip slowly transforms into a mirror you'd rather not look into. It means that desire without awareness is dangerous. That charm, when not rooted in responsibility, becomes manipulation. That seeking youth to feel alive is not vitality. It's avoidance. And that power, when unexamined, distorts the very intimacy it claims to crave. This isn't a moral sermon. It's a psychological reckoning. It's a call to ask yourself deeper questions. Not just what you're doing, but why. Not just who you're drawn to, but what part of you is doing the choosing. Because if you're chasing validation through someone still finding herself, you're not in a relationship, you're in a performance. And every performance ends, often with silence, confusion, or regret. She is not a mirror for your fading youth. She is not a remedy for your loneliness. She is not the answer to a question you've been too afraid to ask yourself. She is becoming. And if you insert yourself into that sacred process only to escape your own stillness, your own unfinished business, then what you leave behind is not memory, it's damage. This isn't about guilt, it's about consciousness, about growing up emotionally, not just aging physically, about learning that real intimacy requires equality, presence, and a willingness to be seen not just in your charm, but in your contradictions. To know better is to do better. And sometimes maturity means stepping back. Not because you couldn't have her, but because you finally understand why you wanted to.